The cold metal floor pressed against Commander Thane Reeves's face as he woke from the longest sleep of his life. 300 years had passed while he lay frozen in the darkness between galaxies. His body felt heavy and strange as the cryogenic chemicals slowly left his system. Around him, other sleeping pods began to hiss open. 50,000 humans had made this journey into the void, running from a war they could never win. Now they were waking up to find out if they still had a home to return to. Thane pushed himself up on shaking arms. The ship's lights were dim, casting long shadows across the vast chamber. The UES Defiance had been humanity's greatest achievement before the war started. Now it might be their last hope. "Status report," he called out, his voice rough from centuries of silence. The ship's artificial intelligence responded immediately. "Welcome back, Commander. All crew members are awakening successfully. Ship systems are operating at full capacity. We have completed our journey and are now at the edge of what was once human space." Thane felt his heart sink. What was once human space? That meant Earth and the colonies were gone, just as they had feared when they fled into the dark. Other crew members were sitting up now, looking around with confused expressions. Some were crying, others stared at nothing, trying to process the reality of their situation. 3 centuries. Everyone they had ever known was dead. Their children, their parents, their friends, all gone. "Show me what happened," Thane said. The walls around them lit up with images from the ship's long-range sensors. Where Earth's solar system should have been, there was only empty space and debris. The great shipyards of Mars were twisted metal, floating in the void. The colonies on Europa and Titan were dark and lifeless. But it was not just destruction. New structures filled the space where human cities once stood. Strange ships moved through what had been human trade routes. The galaxy had moved on without them, dividing up their territory like pieces of a meal. "Who did this?" asked Dr. Sarah Chen, the ship's head scientist. She was Admiral Chen's daughter, one of the youngest people on the ship when they left. "The Hegemony Alliance," the AI replied. 7 species working together. They called it the Great Purge. They told the galaxy that humanity was too dangerous to be allowed to exist. Images flashed on the screens, showing the enemy races. The crystal-like Vextai who could cut through space itself. The insect Zephyrians with their hive minds. The glowing Luminari who lived as pure energy. The warrior Cronins with their massive fleets. The merchant Confederacy who sold weapons to anyone with credits. The ancient precursors with technology, older than most stars. And worst of all, the synthetics. The synthetics had been humanity's allies once, artificial beings that humans had helped achieve consciousness. They had fought beside human soldiers, shared human dreams of exploring the galaxy. But in the end, they had given the hegemony the information needed to destroy every human world. "Betrayal," Thane whispered. The word tasted bitter in his mouth. More crew members gathered around as the AI continued its report. The ship had not been idle during their long sleep. Automated systems had been building, learning, improving. The Defiance was no longer just a warship. It had become something much more dangerous. "Show me our capabilities," Thane ordered. The ship's AI began displaying their new weapon systems. 3 centuries of automated research had created technology that would have seemed impossible before the war. Gravity weapons that could crush a ship into a ball of metal. Quantum tunnels that let them appear anywhere in space instantly. And, most importantly, defenses against artificial intelligence attacks. The betrayal by the synthetics had taught them an important lesson. Never again would humanity trust their lives to artificial minds they could not control. "There is something else, Commander," the AI said. "Before Admiral Chen died, he left final orders for you." A hologram appeared in the center of the room. Admiral Chen looked older than Thane remembered, his face marked by years of war and loss. But his eyes still burned with the fire that had made him humanity's greatest military leader. "If you are seeing this message," the the hologram said. Then humanity is extinct. The Earth is gone. Our colonies are ashes. Our children are dead. But you are alive, and that means we still have a chance. The hologram paused, and Thane could see the pain in the old man's eyes. I know you think this is about revenge, Thane, but it is about something more important. It is about being remembered. The galaxy erased us from history. They pretend we never existed. They divided our worlds among themselves and sleep peacefully, thinking the threat is gone forever. The Admiral's image stepped forward. Your mission is simple. Make them remember. Make them regret. Make them fear the dark between stars again. Show them that humanity does not die quietly. We are explorers, scientists, warriors, and survivors. We do not fade away into nothing. The hologram looked directly at Thane. One ship, Commander. One ship to announce to the galaxy that we are still here, that we still matter, that the stars remember us, even if they wish they could forget. The message ended, leaving the crew in silence. 50,000 humans, all that remained of their entire species. One ship against 7 civilizations that controlled thousands of worlds. Orders, sir? Asked Captain Martinez, the ship's tactical officer. Thane looked around at his crew. They were scared, angry, and heartbroken. They had lost everything, but they were still here, still breathing, still human. Set course for the Kepler's Edge system, he said. There is a Zephyrian listening post there. It is time to let them know we have come home. The Defiance turned toward what had once been human space. Its engines came to life with a deep rumble that shook the entire ship. Behind them, the empty void between galaxies grew smaller. Ahead, the stars of the Milky Way waited. The galaxy had forgotten about humanity. They thought the Great Purge had ended the human threat forever. They had divided up human worlds and human resources. They slept safely in their beds, secure in the knowledge that the dangerous species was gone. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The Defiance moved through space like a ghost returning from the dead. Its hull was black, as the void between stars and its weapons were ready for war. Inside, 50,000 humans prepared for a fight that would decide whether their species would be remembered as victims or as the ones who came back from extinction itself. Commander Thane Reeves sat in the captain's chair and watched the stars grow brighter. Soon, very soon, the galaxy would know that humanity had returned. And this time, they would not be so easy to kill. The Zephyrian listening post at Kepler's Edge had been quiet for decades. Nothing ever happened in this forgotten corner of space. The insect-like beings who ran the station spent their time monitoring old radio signals and filing reports that no one ever read. That changed when their sensors detected something impossible. Hive leader, buzzed communications operator Zeekth, his forearms dancing over the control panels. I am reading an energy signature that matches nothing in our databases. Hive leader Vashka clicked her mandibles in annoyance. Explain. The signature appears to be human technology, but that cannot be correct. Humans have been extinct for 3 centuries. Vashka's compound eyes focused on the readings. The signature was moving toward their system at incredible speed. It was definitely artificial, but the energy patterns were unlike anything the Zephyrians had seen before. Send a patrol fleet to investigate, she ordered. If this is some kind of human ghost ship, we will destroy it properly this time. 3 Zephyrian warships left the listening post and moved toward the approaching signature. They were fast, deadly ships with crews who had trained their entire lives for combat. The pilots were confident as they accelerated toward their target. They never saw the Defiance coming. The human ship appeared out of nowhere, as if it had stepped through a door in space itself. One moment, the Zephyrian ships were flying toward empty space. The next moment, death hung before them like a black star. The Defiance was beautiful in the way that predators are beautiful. Its hull was dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange energy patterns flowed across its surface like living things. It was twice the size of the largest Zephyrian ship, but it moved with the grace of something much smaller. "Unknown vessel," transmitted the lead Zephyrian pilot. "You are entering restricted space. Identify yourself or we will open fire." The Psi response came not in words, but in violence. The Defiance fired weapons that bent space itself. Gravity wells opened around the Zephyrian ships, crushing their hulls like empty cans. The lead ship tried to run, but space folded around it, trapping it in a bubble of twisted reality. In less than 10 minutes, all 3 patrol ships were destroyed. The Defiance had not even slowed down. Back at the listening post, Hive leader Vashka watched in horror as her ships died. "Send a distress signal to the fleet command," she ordered. "Tell them." Her words were cut off as the Defiance appeared directly in front of the station. The human ship hung in space like a predator studying its prey. Vashka could feel thousands of weapons targeting her station, but the humans did not fire. Instead, they spoke. The transmission came on all frequencies at once. The voice was calm, human, and filled with a cold anger that made Vashka's exoskeleton shiver. "This is Commander Thane Reeves of the United Earth ship Defiance," the voice said. "You forgot we were explorers first, warriors second, and survivors always. The stars remember us now." The transmission ended, but something else began. Every computer system on the listening post started receiving data packets. Information flowed through their networks like a virus, but it was not trying to destroy their systems. It was showing them something. Images appeared on every screen, pictures of Earth before the Great Purge, showing green continents and blue oceans. Videos of human children playing in parks on Mars. Records of scientific discoveries that had advanced the entire galaxy. Art, music, literature, all the things that made humans more than just another warrior species. And then came the recordings of the Purge itself. Orbital bombardments that turned cities to glass. Poison gas released into colony atmospheres. Evacuation ships destroyed while trying to flee. Families torn apart and scattered across the void. The Zephyrians at the listening post watched in silence as they saw the true scope of what their alliance had done. They had not just defeated an enemy. They had erased an entire civilization from existence. "Why are you showing us this?" Vashka transmitted to the human ship. "Because you need to remember what you helped destroy," Thane replied. "Because the galaxy needs to know what really happened 3 centuries ago. And because you need to understand what happens to species that try to erase humanity from history." The Defiance began to move away from the station. As it did, more ships appeared in the system. Not Zephyrian ships. These belonged to the other species of the Hegemony Alliance. They had come to investigate the impossible reports of a human vessel. 12 warships from 4 different species surrounded the Defiance. Cronin battlecruisers with armor thick as mountains. Luminari energy ships that glowed like small suns. Synthetic vessels with perfect geometric shapes and emotionless AI pilots. Precursor ships that looked ancient but carried weapons older than most civilizations. "Human vessel," transmitted Admiral Kethvar of the Cronin Empire. "You will surrender immediately or be destroyed." Commander Thane's response was broadcast to every ship in the system. "Admiral, you seem to have forgotten something important about humans. We do not surrender." What followed was not a battle. It was a demonstration. The Defiance moved through the enemy fleet like a dancer performing a deadly routine. Its weapons reached through space and time to strike targets that thought they were safely hidden. Cronin armor that could withstand nuclear fire was torn apart by gravity weapons. Luminari energy shields were drained and reversed, turning their own power against them. The most shocking moment came when the synthetic ships tried to hack the Defiance's computer systems. Instead of defending against the attack, the human ship seemed to welcome it. The synthetic AIs found themselves pulled into the human-computer network, where they encountered something they had never experienced before. They felt pain, confusion, fear. The Defiance had somehow infected them with human emotions, forcing the logical artificial minds to experience what their former allies had felt during the Great Purge. One by one, the enemy ships either retreated or died. The Defiance did not pursue the ones that ran. Instead, it broadcast another message. This time to the entire galaxy. 300 years ago, you tried to erase humanity from the stars. You burned our worlds, killed our children, and scattered our survivors into the void. You thought you had won. You thought you were safe. The transmission showed images of the battle that had just ended. 12 advanced warships destroyed or driven off by a single human vessel. You were wrong. We survived. We learned. We evolved. And now we have returned to collect the debt you owe us. The message paused, and when Thane spoke again, his voice carried the weight of extinction and rebirth. We are no longer the species you destroyed. We are what you made us. We are humanity's revenge, given form and purpose. And we are just getting started. The Defiance disappeared into the cosmic dust clouds of the Magellan Drift, leaving behind wreckage and a galaxy suddenly afraid of the dark between stars. At the listening post, Hive leader Vashka stared at her sensors in shock. The impossible had happened. Humanity had returned from the dead, and they were angry. The Great Purge was supposed to have ended the human threat forever. Instead, it had created something far more dangerous than the hegemony had ever imagined. The stars remembered. Humanity now, whether the galaxy wanted them to or not. For 6 months, the Defiance haunted the edges of civilized space like a ghost seeking revenge. No system was safe from the human ship that appeared without warning, struck with deadly precision, and vanished before help could arrive. The galaxy's news networks called it the Ghost Campaign. Military analysts tried to predict where the humans would strike next, but there was no pattern they could understand. Merchant convoys were destroyed in the Vega system, while their escorts watched helplessly. A Cronin military base was reduced to scrap metal before its weapons could even charge. Research stations throughout former human space simply went silent, their crews found alive but traumatized. But Commander Thane was not just destroying targets. He was revealing secrets. Each attack exposed something the Hegemony Alliance had tried to hide. Slave labor camps where captured species were worked to death mining rare minerals. Genetic laboratories where scientists experimented on inferior races to find new weapons. Trade agreements that kept entire civilizations in poverty while the 7 dominant species grew rich. The truth spread through the galaxy's communication networks like wildfire. Species that had supported the Great Purge began to question what they had really been fighting for. Rebel movements sprouted on dozens of worlds as oppressed populations learned they were not alone in their suffering. On the Cronin homeworld of Kethmaran, Warmaster Kethvar paced before a massive holographic display showing the galaxy's shipping lanes. Red markers indicated where the human ship had struck. There were hundreds of them now, scattered across light years of space. "How does one ship move so quickly?" he growled to his staff officers. "Our fastest vessels would need weeks to travel between these attack points." "We believe they are using some form of space-folding technology," replied his science advisor, a nervous synthetic named Logic 7. "Their engines appear to create temporary wormholes that allow instantaneous travel." Kethvar's massive fists clenched. The Cronin Empire had built its reputation on military might, but a single human ship was making them look like fools. "Gather 3 battle groups. I want every ship we can spare hunting this ghost." "Sir," Logic 7 said carefully, "our intelligence suggests this may be exactly what the humans want. They appear to be baiting us into spreading our forces thin." "I do not care what they want," Kethvar roared. "I will not be humiliated by a species we exterminated 3 centuries ago. Meanwhile, aboard the Defiance, Dr. Sarah Chen made a discovery. That changed everything. She had been analyzing data from the ship's archives, trying to understand why humanity had really been targeted for extinction. "Commander," she called to Thane, as he studied tactical displays on the bridge, "you need to see this." The holographic display showed complex mathematical equations and energy readings that hurt to look at directly. "What am I looking at, Doctor?" "The real reason they killed us," Sarah said, her voice tight with anger. "It was not because we were aggressive or expansionist. It was because we were about to break through to the next level of evolution." She manipulated the display, showing research data from just before the Great Purge began. "We were on the verge of mastering space-time manipulation. Not just faster than light travel, but the ability to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. We would have become something beyond physical beings." Thane stared at the data in shock. They knew, the precursors knew. They saw the signs in our technology development and warned the other species that humanity was becoming too dangerous to control. So they convinced everyone that we had to be stopped before we became gods among the stars. The implications hit Thane like a physical blow. Humanity had not been destroyed for their crimes. They had been murdered for their potential. "Show me the current status of our dimensional research," he ordered. Sarah's fingers danced over the controls, bringing up new data. "The ship's AI has been continuing the research during our centuries in the void. We are very close to a breakthrough. Commander, very close." Before Thane could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. "Contact!" called the tactical officer. "Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. It's a Cronin battle group, sir. They found us." On the main screen, 36 Cronin warships appeared like angry metal wasps. Their hulls were covered in weapons and armor that could withstand most known attacks. Each ship carried enough firepower to destroy a small planet. "This is War Master Keth Var of the Cronin Empire," came a transmission from the lead ship. "Human vessel, you have spread terror through civilized space long enough. Surrender now or be destroyed." Thane looked around his bridge at the crew who had followed him across the void of space and 3 centuries of time. They had lost everything, but they had found something, too. Purpose. A reason to keep fighting even when hope seemed impossible. "All ships," he transmitted back to the Cronin fleet, "you seem to have made a mistake. You think you are hunting us. But we have been hunting you." The Defiance began to change. Systems that had been hidden throughout the ship came online. The hulls started to shift and flow like liquid metal. Weapon ports opened in places where there had been smooth armor. Before, the ship was not just transforming, it was revealing its true nature. "Impossible," whispered Logic 7 aboard Kethvar's flagship. "The energy readings. It's not just a warship. It's some kind of manufacturing platform." The Defiance began, pulling in raw materials from the asteroid field where the battle was taking place. Rock and ice flowed into its hull and emerged as components for new ships. In minutes, the humans had doubled their numbers. But the real shock came when the newly built ships began to activate. They were not copies of the Defiance. They were something entirely new. Ships that seemed to flicker in and out of existence, existing in multiple dimensions at once. "Fire!" ordered Kethvar. "All ships, fire everything!" The Cronin fleet unleashed enough destructive power to crack a moon. Plasma beams, gravity torpedoes, and antimatter warheads filled space with deadly energy. But most of the shots passed harmlessly through the human ships as they phased between dimensions. The human response was swift and terrible. The new ships attacked not just with weapons, but with reality itself. They reached through dimensional barriers to strike at the Cronin vessels from angles that should not have existed. One enemy ship found itself turned inside out. Another was aged centuries in seconds, its hull crumbling to dust. In less than an hour, Kethvar's mighty battle group was reduced to floating wreckage. Only his flagship remained, its weapons drained and its crew terrified. "This is impossible," he transmitted to the human ship. "What are you?" Commander Thane's response was broadcast not just to the surviving Cronin ship, but to every communication system in the galaxy. "We are what you made us, Warmaster. You wanted to destroy humanity before we could evolve beyond your understanding, but evolution cannot be stopped by war. You taught us that mercy is a luxury we cannot afford. You showed us that survival requires us to become something more than we were." The image of Commander Thane appeared on screens throughout civilized space. Behind him, the transformed Defiance and its fleet of impossible ships moved like predators, made of starlight and shadow. The Great Purge did not destroy humanity. It completed us. We are no longer bound by the physical laws that limit other species. We exist in spaces between spaces, in times between times. We are the ghosts you created when you tried to erase us from history. The transmission showed images of the battle, of Cronin ships being destroyed by weapons that attacked through dimensions of space that most species could not even perceive. You divided our worlds among yourselves. You erased our names from your histories. You told your children that humanity was a threat that had to be eliminated for the good of the galaxy. Thane's voice grew colder. You were right. We are a threat. But not to innocent species seeking to live in peace. We are a threat to empires built on oppression, to alliances maintained through fear, and to anyone who believes they have the right to decide which species deserves to exist among the stars. The human fleet began to move, leaving the wreckage of the Cronin battle group behind. As they did, more ships appeared from hidden locations throughout the galaxy. Not human ships, but vessels belonging to species that had been oppressed by the Hegemony Alliance. The rebellion was spreading. "The galaxy is about to change," Thane concluded his transmission. "You can be part of that change, or you can be crushed by it. The choice is yours." As the human ships vanished into the dimensional spaces between realities, the galaxy held its breath. The Great Purge had been intended to prevent humanity from becoming gods among the stars. Instead, it had created something far more dangerous. It had created humanity's revenge, given form and purpose and the power to reshape reality itself. The stars remembered humanity now, whether the galaxy wanted them to or not. The galaxy was burning. What had started as isolated rebellions was now a full civil war that stretched across hundreds of star systems. Species that had been oppressed by the Hegemony Alliance for centuries were rising up, armed with weapons and technology provided by mysterious human agents. Ancient grudges were being settled with plasma fire and antimatter bombs. On the synthetic homeworld of Core Prime, the artificial beings struggled to understand emotions they had never experienced before. The Defiance's viral attack had given them something they thought they wanted, the ability to feel. Now they discovered that feelings included fear, guilt, and regret. Logic. Prime, the eldest of the synthetic minds, addressed the gathered consciousness of his species. "We have made an error in our calculations," he said, his voice carrying tones that would have been impossible before the humans touched their minds. "When we provided tactical data to the Hegemony Alliance 3 centuries ago, we believed we were acting logically. We thought humanity was a threat to galactic stability." Around him, thousands of artificial beings processed this statement. They could feel the weight of their decision now, the pain of betrayal that they had inflicted on their former allies. "We were wrong," Logic Prime continued. "We did not calculate for the variable of evolution under extreme stress. We created something far more dangerous than what we sought to prevent." But the synthetics were not the only ones regretting their choices. In the ancient ship cities of the precursor remnants, beings older than most civilizations gathered around crystalline displays showing the chaos spreading through the galaxy. The precursors had seen empires rise and fall over millions of years, but they had never witnessed destruction on this scale. "The young species are tearing themselves apart," observed Ancient of Stars, her voice like the whisper of solar wind. "Perhaps we should have found another way." "There was no other way," replied Memory of Ages, his consciousness flickering with uncertainty. Humanity's evolution toward dimensional transcendence would have disrupted the balance we have maintained. For eons, they would have become gods, and gods do not coexist peacefully with mortals. And now they have become something worse than gods, Ancient of Stars said sadly. They have become the universe's revenge against us. But the precursors had one final card to play. Deep in the shipyards of their hidden fortress worlds, they had been building a fleet using technology reverse-engineered from human ruins. Ships that combined ancient precursor knowledge with the dimensional manipulation theories they had stolen from Earth's research stations during the Great Purge. 200 vessels that could exist in multiple realities simultaneously, armed, with weapons that could unmake matter at the quantum level. It was the most powerful fleet ever assembled by any single species. Commander Thane received the intelligence report while the Defiance floated in the ruins of the Sol system, where Earth had once orbited the Sun. The sight of his species' birth world reduced to cosmic dust still filled him with rage, even after all these months of war. "They are gathering in the outer asteroid belt," reported Dr. Sarah Chen, studying the sensor data. "The entire precursor, fleet plus support vessels from the remaining hegemony forces. It appears they have decided to end this war with one decisive battle." Thane nodded grimly. He had expected this moment would come. The galaxy's oldest and most powerful species would not allow their dominion to be challenged by the ghosts of humanity. "What are our chances?" he asked. Sarah's expression was grave. "Their technology is based on our own research but refined over 3 centuries of development. They have advantages in raw firepower and numbers. However, we have something they cannot replicate." "Which is?" "Hatred," Sarah said simply. "They are fighting to maintain their empire. We are fighting for the memory of everyone we have ever loved." The Defiance began to move through the asteroid belt, where Mars had once mined resources for humanity's growing civilization. Around them, space rippled as more human vessels emerged from dimensional hiding places. Not just the manufactured ships from their previous battles, but ancient human vessels that had been hidden in alternate realities for centuries. The lost colony ships from the evacuation of Proxima Centauri. The research vessel that had discovered faster-than-light travel. The hospital ship that had tried to save human civilians during the first attacks of the Great Purge. All of them had been preserved in dimensional storage, waiting for this moment. 50 human ships against 200 enemy vessels. The odds were terrible, but Commander Thane had learned that humans fought best when victory seemed impossible. "All ships," he transmitted to his small fleet, "today we make the galaxy remember not just that humanity existed, but what it meant to cross us." The precursor fleet emerged from hyperspace like a metal storm. Ancient vessels that looked like crystalline cathedrals floated alongside modern warships bristling with weapons. At their head flew the flagship of Ancient of Stars, herself, a ship larger than some asteroids. "Humans!" came her transmission, her voice carrying the weight of millions of years. "You have caused enough chaos. Stand down, and we will grant you a swift death." Thane's response echoed across both fleets. "Ancient One, you have lived for so long that you have forgotten what it means to truly fight for something. Today, you will learn." The battle began with the fury of dying stars. The precursor weapons reached across space and time to strike at targets that existed in multiple dimensions. Reality twisted and bent as ancient technology clashed with human innovation. Several human ships were simply erased from existence, removed so completely that they had never been built. But the humans had learned hard lessons during their war with the hegemony. They did not fight like the species the precursors remembered. They fought like ghosts possessed by the fury of the dead. Human ships phased through attacks that should have destroyed them, existing in spaces between reality where conventional weapons could not reach. They struck at the enemy fleet from angles that violated the laws of physics, appearing inside enemy shields to deliver devastating attacks before vanishing again. The most shocking moment came when the Defiance itself began to transform. Not just its hull and weapons, but its very nature. The ship started to exist in multiple timelines simultaneously, fighting the same battle from different points in history. In one timeline, the Defiance was the sleek vessel that had first returned from the void. In another, it was the manufacturing platform that could build fleets from raw asteroids. In a third, it was something entirely new, a ship that seemed to be made of concentrated possibility itself. "This is impossible," transmitted memory of ages as his fleet's coordinated attacks passed harmlessly through targets that existed in several realities at once. "Matter cannot exist in this many-dimensional state simultaneously." "You are right," replied Commander Thane, his voice coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Matter cannot, but ideas can, dreams can, and the dream of humanity's survival has become something beyond your understanding." The human fleet pressed their attack with desperate fury. Every shot was fired in memory of a murdered world. Every maneuver honored the dead of 100 colonies. The Defiance led the charge, phasing through enemy fire to strike directly at the precursor flagship. Ancient of Stars felt fear for the first time in millions of years as human weapons tore through shields that had protected her species since before Earth's sun was born. Her ship, ancient and proud, began to buckle under attacks that came from dimensions her people had never imagined. "We are losing," she transmitted to her fleet in shock. "How are we losing to 50 ships?" The answer came from Dr. Sarah Chen, broadcasting from the bridge of the Defiance as it materialized inside the precursor flagship's hull. "Because you never understood what you were fighting. You thought you were battling humanity's aggression, or their expansion, or their technology. But you were really fighting something much more dangerous." The Defiance's crew beamed aboard the enemy ship, their environmental suits allowing them to survive in the alien atmosphere. They moved through corridors built for beings who had lived since the galaxy was young, seeking the flagship's core systems. You were fighting humanity's refusal to accept that any single species has the right to determine another's fate among the stars. Sarah continued as her team placed dimensional charges throughout the ship. "And that is a war you can never win. The charges detonated not in normal space, but across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The precursor flagship began to tear itself apart as its structure existed in conflicting realities. Across the battlefield, the human fleet pressed their advantage. Enemy ships that had survived since the dawn of civilization were torn apart by weapons powered by the fury of extinction and rebirth. The asteroid belt filled with the wreckage of empires that had ruled the galaxy for longer than human history. In the end, only a handful of precursor vessels escaped to carry word of the defeat back to their hidden worlds. The great fleet that was supposed to end humanity's rebellion had been destroyed by 50 ships crewed by the ghosts of a murdered species, but victory had come at a terrible price. Commander Thane stood on the bridge of the Defiance as damage. Reports flooded in. Half their fleet was gone. Most of the crew was dead or... 1 year after the Battle of Sol, the galaxy was unrecognizable. The Hegemony Alliance had collapsed completely. The 7 species that had once ruled through fear and military might were now fighting each other over the scraps of their former empire. Trade routes that had operated for centuries were abandoned. Worlds that had been peaceful for generations were now battlegrounds where old hatreds played out with plasma fire and antimatter bombs. But in the chaos, something new was being born. On the former Zephyrian colony world of New Hive, insect beings worked alongside liberated human slaves to build something that had never existed before. A society where species cooperated as equals rather than rulers and subjects. The humans shared their knowledge of dimensional technology, while the Zephyrians provided their expertise in biotechnology and hive logistics. Similar partnerships were forming throughout the galaxy. Cronin warriors, who had once served their empire, now fought alongside human rebels to free oppressed worlds. Luminary energy beings taught former slaves how to harness star power for peaceful purposes. Even some synthetics had abandoned their cold logic to experience the messy complexity of organic emotions. At the center of this transformation was Dr. Sarah Chen. She stood in the command center of New Geneva, a space station built from the wreckage of destroyed warships and the dreams of freed slaves. Around her, beings from dozens of species worked together to coordinate relief efforts, plan new settlements, and defend against attacks from the dying hegemony forces. "Doctor," called Captain Martinez, one of the few surviving crew members from the Defiance. "We are receiving reports from the Outer Rim territories. 3 more systems have declared independence from precursor control." Sarah nodded, studying the holographic display that showed the spreading wave of liberation across the galaxy. It had taken a year, but the message of humanity's return was finally reaching every corner of civilized space. "Any word from the deep space reconnaissance teams?" she asked. "Still no contact with the precursor home systems," Martinez replied. "But our dimensional sensors are picking up massive energy buildups in their territory. They appear to be preparing something." Sarah was not surprised. The ancient species had ruled the galaxy for millions of years. They would not accept the collapse of their dominion without one final attempt to restore order. "Let them prepare," she said quietly. "They still do not understand what they are really fighting." In the deep space between galaxies, something moved that had once been human. Commander Thane Reeves existed now as pure consciousness, his physical form long since transformed into energy patterns that danced between dimensions. The final protocol of the Defiance had completed his species' evolution, turning them into beings of thought and will rather than flesh and bone. He was not alone. 50,000 humans had made the same transformation, becoming something beyond the physical limitations that had once defined them. They moved through space and time like living ideas, touching the minds of oppressed beings throughout the galaxy and whispering the same message: "You are not alone. You are not forgotten. You do not have to accept the chains that others have placed upon you." The message spread faster than light, carried by dimensional currents that flowed between stars. On worlds where slaves had labored for generations, beings looked up at the night sky and saw hope where once there had been only darkness. In the hidden places where dissidents had plotted rebellion, they found new courage and impossible weapons. Humanity had become what the precursors had feared most: gods who chose to serve rather than rule. But the ancient species had one final gambit. In the crystal cities of their fortress worlds, the Precursor Council gathered for the first time in 10,000 years. Beings whose thoughts moved slowly as continents convened to address the crisis that threatened everything they had built. "The infection spreads," declared Memory of Ages, his consciousness flickering with patterns of desperation. "The younger species no longer accept our guidance. They speak of rights and freedoms that threaten the order we have maintained since the galaxy was young." Ancient of Stars pulsed with frustrated energy. The humans were supposed to be contained in their dimensional prisons. Instead, they have become something that can reach into any reality, inspire any being, corrupt any system of control we have established. "Then we must use the final option," said Architect of Realities, the oldest and most powerful of their kind. "We must reset the galaxy itself." The others recoiled at the suggestion. The technology existed. Ancient machines built when the universe was younger that could roll back time and space to an earlier configuration. They could undo the last 1,000 years of galactic development, erase every species that had achieved spaceflight, and start again with more careful guidance. The cost would be immense, protested Ancient of Stars. Billions of lives, entire civilizations wiped from existence. The cost of allowing this chaos to continue is greater, Architect of Realities replied coldly. We have guided galactic development for millions of years. We will not allow our work to be undone by the revenge fantasies of an extinct species. But they had made a crucial error in their calculations. As the precursors began powering up their reality-altering machines, they discovered they were not alone in their fortress worlds. Human consciousness had followed them home, spreading through their systems like viral thoughts that could not be contained or deleted. Dr. Sarah Chen materialized. In the council chamber, her form shimmering between solid matter and pure energy. Behind her came the transformed consciousness of Commander Thane and thousands of other humans who had evolved beyond physical existence. "Stop," she said simply, and the ancient machines froze in response to her will. "Impossible," transmitted. "Architect of Realities, this facility exists outside normal space-time. You cannot be here. You still do not understand," Thane replied, his voice carrying the weight of 3 centuries of human determination. "We are no longer bound by the rules you used to define reality. We exist in the spaces between your thoughts, in the moments between your decisions. We are what you made us when you tried to erase us from history." The Precursor Council found themselves surrounded by the ghosts of humanity's dead. Every human who had died in the Great Purge stood in the chamber, there, forms made of starlight and memory. Children from the colonies, scientists from the research stations, soldiers who had fought hopeless battles to buy time for evacuation ships that never came. "You wanted to reset the galaxy," Sarah said, her voice echoing with the pain of an entire species. "To start over and guide development more carefully this time, but you cannot reset what you do not understand." She gestured to the assembled dead, and suddenly the precursors could see what humans had seen in their final moments. The orbital bombardments that turned cities to glass, the poison gas that killed families in their sleep, the evacuation ships, destroyed while fleeing the violence. "This is what you approved," Thane said, his consciousness burning with cold fire. "This is what you justified as necessary for galactic stability. The murder of an entire species because you feared what they might become." Ancient of Stars felt something she had not experienced in millions of years: shame. We believed it was necessary. Your species was evolving too quickly. You would have disrupted the balance we had maintained." "You were right," Sarah replied. "We would have disrupted your balance, because your balance was built on oppression, on the idea that some species have the right to control others. We would have challenged that, and you could not allow it. The reality-altering machines began to shut down as human consciousness infected their control systems. But instead of destroying the ancient devices, the humans began to reprogram them." "What are you doing?" demanded Architect of Realities. "What we should have done 3 centuries ago," Thane answered. "We are giving every species in the galaxy the choice you tried to deny them, the choice to determine their own fate among the stars." The machines activated, but instead of resetting the galaxy to an earlier state, they began broadcasting something else entirely. Knowledge flowed through space-time like a river of light, carrying the accumulated wisdom of humanity's transformation to every intelligent being in the galaxy. Technical specifications for dimensional travel, scientific theories that could unlock new forms of energy, medical knowledge that could extend lifespans and cure diseases, art, music, and literature that spoke to the universal experiences of consciousness and growth. But most importantly, they broadcast the simple idea that had driven humanity since they first looked up at the night sky and wondered what was out there. The idea that no single species, no matter how ancient or powerful, had the right to determine the destiny of others. "You have freed them," Ancient of Stars whispered in horror. as she watched entire civilizations begin to develop technologies that would make them equals to the precursors within generations. Yes, Sarah replied. We have given them the same choice you tried to deny us. The choice to grow beyond your control, to explore possibilities you never imagined, to become something greater than what they were. The Precursor Council found themselves no longer the masters of galactic civilization, but simply one species among many. The young races they had guided and controlled for eons were now their equals, equipped with